Hello student friends, I welcome you all to this video. The topic for this video is testing of statistical hypothesis. This is my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like and share and watch this video till end. The topic of today's video is testing of statistical hypothesis. What do you mean by hypothesis? Hypothesis means an assumption. Take the example of smoking and lung cancer. So when we assume that smoking causes lung cancer, so this is one of the hypotheses. So in case of statistics, we want to test this hypothesis by applying statistical test or test of significance. So let us see about the statistical hypothesis. So there are two types of hypothesis whenever we want to test the hypothesis. So if you plan any research project, first you need to develop the hypothesis. First type is null hypothesis or hypothesis of no difference, and second is the hypothesis of significant difference or alternate hypothesis. So what do you mean by null hypothesis? So null itself indicates it is the zero or no association. So if you take null hypothesis, it will be like there is no association between smoking and lung cancer. But there is another type of hypothesis which is called as hypothesis of significant difference or alternate hypothesis. It states that there is a significant association between smoking and lung cancer. So whenever we want to make minimum error in accepting or rejecting the hypothesis, we divide the sampling distribution or the area under the normal curve into two regions. So this is very important and very basic part of the testing of hypothesis. So here you can see this is the area which is plain and this is the shaded area. So if our hypothesis or observation falls in this plain area, it is called as and we accept the null hypothesis. So acceptance of region of null hypothesis. So here if our observation falls and we accept it, it is called as a zone of acceptance. So this is the zone of acceptance for our observation. And if the observation falls in this shaded area, it is called as the zone of rejection. So 95% times we are correct that we accept the null hypothesis, and in 5% of the cases we reject the hypothesis. So this plain area is the zone of acceptance and this shaded area is the zone of rejection. So taking into this principle, we will discuss the scenarios about the falling of an observation in this normal distribution curve. So first is if the result of a sample falls in the plane area. If the result falls in the plane area, which is the limit, we have seen that it is the confidence limit, that is the mean minus plus 1.96 standard error. So here we accept the observation or we accept the null hypothesis, and it is called as acceptance region of null hypothesis. So this is the zone of acceptance. Now next is the zone of rejection. So if the observation falls in this shaded area, the observation is not by chance and it is because of the significant difference. So we reject the null hypothesis. What we do? We reject the null hypothesis and we accept the alternate hypothesis. But we are talking in terms of null hypothesis. If the observation falls here, it becomes the zone of acceptance. If the observation falls here, it becomes the zone of rejection. So zone of rejection is the shaded area and zone of acceptance is the plain area. So please remember this. Now this is for the zone of acceptance, plain area in the both same, and in case of right-tailed distribution, this is the zone of rejection, and in left tail zone, it is the zone of rejection. So this is for one tail test. We'll see about what is one tail and what is two tail. Now depending on the acceptance and rejection of the null hypothesis, we commit some mistakes which are called as errors, and it is also called as type 1 error and type 2 error. So these are the some types of errors which may perform while applying a statistical test and conducting a study. So first we see the type 1 error, or it is also called as alpha error. So we follow these zones of acceptance and rejection to interpret the significance of result at 5% level of significance. The null hypothesis of no difference is rejected even when the estimate falls in zone of acceptance. Suppose if your observation is falling in this region, so what we should do actually? Ideally, we should accept it, but we are rejecting this observation. We are rejecting that it is not by chance. So this becomes the type 1 error when the observation is falling in the zone of acceptance and we are rejecting it, or when the null hypothesis is correct but we are rejecting it, it is called as type 1 error or alpha error. Type 2 error or beta error, when the observation falls in the zone of rejection. So we actually should reject it, but we are accepting it. So when we are accepting an observation which is falling in the zone of rejection, it is called as type 2 error or beta error. So when the observation falls in the acceptance region and we accept it, null hypothesis, it is correct decision. But when the observation falls in the acceptance zone and we reject it, it becomes type 1 error. When the observation falls in shaded area and we reject it, it is the correct decision. But when the observation falls in this rejection area and we accept it, it becomes type 2 error. So these are the 4 possible outcomes whenever we study the concept of hypothesis. So there are 4 ways. First is the null hypothesis is true, means it is falling in the zone of acceptance and we are accepting it. So it becomes a correct decision. If the null hypothesis is false and our test rejected, means it is falling in the shaded area and we are rejecting it, it is the correct decision. But if the observation is falling in the zone of acceptance and we are rejecting it, it becomes type 1 error. And if we are accepting observation which is falling in the zone of rejection, it is called as the type 2 error. So like this, type 1 error and type 2 error. So in simple ways, when the observation falls in zone of acceptance, we reject it, it is type 1 error. When the observation falls in zone of rejection and we accept it, it is called as type 2 error. So like this, type 1 and type 2 error are occurs in applying a statistical test or in doing a particular type of study. So to avoid this type of errors, what we do, type 1 error is usually fixed in advance by choice of level of significance. So 5% level of significance. So type 1 error is accepted or fixed at the level of 5%. So in medical studies, type 1 error is more serious as compared to the type 2, because there is chance that if the person is not having disease, but we are labeling him as having the disease, so which is more dangerous. And to minimize the error of chance, we should take large random samples. So to avoid this type of errors, we are supposed to take the large sample size. So whenever we perform a study, we calculate the minimum required number of samples, and to avoid these errors, we are supposed to take at least that much number of sample size or more than that. So by this, we can avoid the errors in the statistical significance. So this is all about the testing of statistical hypothesis. This is just the concept of the type 1 error and type 2 error. What do you mean by null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis? So whenever we plan a study, we should be able to perform or state the null hypothesis and the alternate hypothesis. So this is all about the testing of statistical hypothesis. Thank you very much.